Well, hello and welcome to Atheism versus Logic. I hope you're enjoying this channel as I make you think about being very rational and skeptical on things that you might have just taken by blind faith, like abiogenesis. And so in this video, I want to talk to you about a test. So here's a test for atheism or for atheists. And what it is language. So we know that RNA, DNA, and proteins require specific sequences to be functional, very much like a paragraph. A paragraph requires, a functional sequence or a specific sequence to be functional. And so here's a simple test that you can do to see if abiogenesis makes sense. So for abiogenesis to happen, you would have to have RNA, DNA, and proteins, functional proteins, and that RNA or DNA, which many people think RNA could form a double helix. I know in videos that I've watched, scientists have to add an enzyme to actually make that happen. So let's just say RNA and proteins for now, and let's even just give you guys the benefit of the doubt that could turn into life, which that's definitely debatable. So in order for life to occur naturally, you'd have to have RNA with functional sequences. Those sequences would have to be very specific to be recipes or blueprints for functional proteins. And then you'd also have to have the functional proteins, or else the code doesn't matter. The recipe doesn't matter without proteins to do something with it, as the ribosome. And of course, the ribosome is mainly made of RNA, but it does need proteins. But you'd have to have all that forming in a plasma membrane or a lipid bilayer, which that's very unstable. I just recently found out about. So you've got this universe where proteins and RNA could form in the specific sequence. But if it did, it'd have to find a microscopic membrane to be in for it to actually have a chance at life. And then, of course, there's the question, if you put all the pieces necessary inside of a membrane, would they learn to work together? And I would say no. But let's get back to just debunking this idea that nature could produce functional recipes and functional proteins, which have to be in specific sequences. So go to your computer or your smartphone, but you're going to have to use a way for you to type without autocorrect, right? So you're going to have to be able to randomly type. And so here's the test. Here's the test for atheism and for atheists is see if you can produce a functional sentence. Now, I believe the equivalent of a functional recipe or a functional protein, which a small protein is about 200 amino acids long, would be producing a functional paragraph. And it's equivalent because, there's almost an endless number of arrangements that amino acids could put themselves in to produce a functional protein. There's just many different functional proteins. Similar to there's an infinite amount of functional paragraphs, right? So if you can produce a functional paragraph, which there's an endless possibility of functional ones, randomly, then, nature can produce a functional protein. And then, of course, the RNA is the same thing. It would have to be the recipe for that functional protein. So what you do is just, without looking, and I recommend using one finger because we've memorized the keys on the keyboard. So without looking, just start pecking away at a keyboard, around 200 characters, and just see what happens. See if you can get, of course you'll get some words that arise, typically 3-letter words. You might get a 4-letter word, but see if you can get words in a row, right? See if you can create a sentence with a period, right? That would be, I bet you could do that for a very long time, and it would be very difficult for you to even get one sentence, let alone a paragraph. So that's the test for atheism. And this is what atheists don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about sequence, that sequence matters. And it's like they harp on, hey, look, amino acids could arise naturally. Look, nucleotides and RNA, self-replicating RNA. Who cares? It has to be in the specific sequence. Do you guys understand that? Right? The building blocks for life do not matter if they're in the wrong sequence. And then if they even get into the right sequence, which I don't believe is possible, then they would have to learn to work together, right? Like you could puncture a cell. You could take all the pieces out, put it into a new membrane. Would it work together, right? So you've got all the parts necessary, but there's just something special about life that I believe requires a creator. So do that. Take some videos, have fun with it. Take some videos of you just pecking away at the computer or the laptop, and again, make sure autocorrect is not on, and just see what happens. See if you can get 3 words in a row. See if you can get a complete functional sentence that makes sense. And then I bet that's very hard and very unlikely. And then I believe it is impossible to get a functional paragraph. And that's why I'm so bullish and so confident that life couldn't make itself, because life would never produce a functional protein or a functional recipe for a protein. And all life, the simplest form of life has recipes for proteins and proteins. They're super complicated. So, and here's another thing. I understand not liking religion, right? That's a lot of what Jesus came to do, is break down religion, make it a relationship with God more personal. I believe Roman Catholicism is a perversion of Christianity. I follow Jesus. This is not about which God, because I know that's usually what you guys do when you get trapped and you realize the science points to a creator. Then you're like, well, which God? You could be a deist, right? You could at least you'd be intellectually honest with the science. And you could say, you know what? We're obviously created. It is obvious that proteins don't make themselves and the recipes for proteins don't make themselves. This would never happen. And then you'd have to have many of them together inside a microscopic membrane working together for life to happen, right? Not going to happen. Impossible. So to be intellectually honest with that, you don't have to immediately jump to a religion. You can just follow the evidence and say, you know what? We were created by something or some things. I don't know what, but maybe I'll find out. And then, you should start looking. What did it for me is reading the parables of Jesus. They just made sense. And you might have a lot of questions about Christianity and criticisms. I've heard so many questions and criticisms toward Christianity that are easily answered by Jesus in his parables, which parables are just his stories to prove a point. All right. They're analogies. So I recommend you do that. But again, let's just be honest. Let's be honest and say that we were obviously created. And then you can start using your mental energy for seeking God. And Jesus said, seek and you will find. So you've got to maybe ask yourself the tough question. Is it just that you don't even want to know if there's a God? Because you might be, I don't know, you might have certain fears of what that God might ask you to do. I don't know. But just remember, he made the orgasm. You might want to think twice about rejecting the maker of the orgasm. So I don't know if you've had one of those, but they're pretty fantastic. So anyway, let's just be intellectually honest. Do the test. It's a fun test, just to randomly type and see what you come up with. Of course, you'd have to videotape or record yourself typing, or else I'm not going to believe you. If you just send me a paragraph and say, hey, look, I did this randomly, I'm not going to believe you. I wouldn't believe you probably if you sent me a sentence. You'd have to record yourself doing that. But of course, man, now we're in the world of deep fakes where people can manipulate video, and it's hard to believe what you see anymore on videos. But anyway, do the test and see how unlikely it is to even come up with a simple sentence. And then just be honest with yourself and realize, hey, we were created. Recipes don't make themselves. Functional recipes, also known as genes, do not make themselves. Proteins do not make themselves. And then just understand you don't have to immediately adopt a religion. You could just say, hey, I don't know who the creator is, but it's obvious that we were created by something. And then I recommend you read the parables of Jesus and see if maybe you're like, man, I think this is our creator. This makes sense. This speaks to me. And Jesus said that. He said, my sheep hear my voice. I'm sorry I can't give you scientific evidence of who the creator is. It's very much like the movie Contact that was written by Carl Sagan, an atheist or agnostic. And he gets Christianity right in that movie. It's a great parable of Christianity because I experience God and I can't explain it to anyone else. I can't force them to believe in Jesus also. I can just say that, you know what? I believe in Jesus and I've been experiencing Jesus. I read his words. I'm living for him. I talk to him. I can sense that he's working things to my good. He answers my prayers. And I know that's not proof for you, but I'm just telling you, watch the movie Contact. It's very similar. It's hard. You can't force someone to believe in Jesus, and he doesn't want that. He could force you, but he wants a relationship with you, so he's not going to make it so that you can't leave him. God made it so you could leave him. Look at the Garden of Eden. He made a tree that Adam and Eve could eat to leave him. And then he's given you, the same thing. You have the option to reason your way away from God. But may you reason your way to God. Read the parables of Jesus and see if they speak to you.